Today on The Future of Everything, the future of virtual assistants. Siri, please call my mother. Alexa, what's the weather today? In a very rapid period of time, virtual assistants, these little disembodied voices in our devices that answer our questions and obey our commands to some degree, have emerged as a pretty important and prevalent part of everyday life. Our cell phones have an assistant. If it's an Apple phone, it's Siri that can answer questions, access the features of our phone, be generally available. Amazon's Alexa technology can make purchases, can give information, play music, and I believe do literally tens of thousands of other things. Microsoft has an assistant, I believe, named Cortana. Google and Android phones have an assistant called Google Assistant, I believe. And these are remarkable. They understand spoken English, and I'm sure they understand other languages as well. They seem ready to respond all the time. They give easy access to otherwise what might be complex computational instructions and even physical capabilities like turning appliances on and off. And they're getting better as we give them more experience. But there are some downsides and some worries. There are fears of privacy. They're always listening, right? In fact, there was a thing in the news recently about, in fact, some of them are always listening. They have access to your credit cards and bank information sometimes. They are learning your preferences for things, whether you like it or not, and whether you like your preferences or not. And are these systems open that can be inspected, or are they closed? It seems that they may be with us forever, but it is not clear that they are built or maintained in a way that is comfortable for all users, especially the users who take the time to look under the hood. Professor Monica Lam is a professor of computer science and electrical engineering at Stanford University. Monica is an expert at many things, and most recently, virtual assistants, how they work now and how they should work in the future. Monica, you have suggested that currently it is maybe unhealthy to have just a few big companies creating these proprietary virtual assistants, and that there maybe should be a more open environment for competition and integration. Now, I interact with at least two of these regularly and have had the experience of calling Siri Alexa or Alexa Siri. Will the future ever give us the chance to have a single assistant that has access to all of our different devices and information, or will it always be fragmented the way it is now?
So, actually, in the end, I would imagine that there will be like one or two assistants that you will interact with. I mean, you will interact with one, but the world would be using just a couple of these assistants because we have seen so many platform monopolies that emerge.
Yes.
I mean, if you think about Facebook, it is basically the de facto standard for social interactions. And I think that there may be one or two, but what I worry about is that there will not be choice. And that means that there is no open competition, and then you are kind of stuck with whatever these platforms provide for you.
So as an expert at these platforms, let's step back. What are the key elements that these platforms technologically can do? Like, for example, one obvious one is they clearly seem to understand spoken language. How do you think about the key features of a virtual assistant that are required to be good and functional? And then can you tell me how much of that is shared across the industry and how much is proprietary?
So let's start with the basic operations. You can turn on the light, you can, open the garage door and so forth. And
get the weather,
get a joke.
Right, get a joke.
And all of these primitives are stored in each company's proprietary platform. So if you look at Alexa, they have like 50,000 skills. Last time I looked.
50,000 for Alexa.
50,000 third-party skills. Like you can order a pizza, you can call Uber, all these various things that people want to do.
When you say skill, that's what they call like one set of commands that are related to a certain
device.
Narrow idea
Yes.
or device. Okay.
Yeah. Like the thermostat is a skill
Okay.
and so forth. So there's 50,000 skills. So a lot of people enter this information into Alexa's repository of skills, but that's all proprietary. Meaning that if I want to build a virtual assistant, I cannot tap into one of these skills and let my assistant order Uber. I have to redo all this work. And as a result, Google is putting in lots of skill repositories.
As a result, say it again because of the
sorry.
mic. As a result?
So imagine that you have to build your own platform of skills. How much work does it take? Right?
So right now, what I'm inferring is that the Apple Siri can't use things that were built for Alexa. You would have to start from scratch.
You will have to start from scratch. If you look at CES, which is the Consumer Electronics Show.
I believe it's a big show in Nevada.
It is the biggest show. And people
in Las Vegas.
In Las Vegas.
Yes, I've never been.
You should go.
Is it fun?
It is you have to go and experience it for yourself.
Okay.
It is huge.
Okay.
And everybody is putting up these IoTs, Internet of Things.
Yes.
And so what I understood is that there are like 40% are hooked up to Alexa, 40% hooked up to Google, and the rest probably not hooked up to much of anything. Okay.
I see.
So the monopoly, maybe the oligopoly is emerging. It's like there are a couple of these really big platforms. And these are closed systems. They are open, but they're proprietary.
Okay.
Okay. You can enter your skills into those repositories, but it's not open to everybody.
Now, why, as a consumer or even as a government person, should I be worried about this oligopoly? Is it fundamentally a problem?
Well, let's look at the web today. What we have is a graphical web, right? You go to the browser and you can go visit any web page that you want.
Yes.
Because all the different companies want to reach as many people as they want, they want to reach all these people.
Yes.
So they put up the website that you can use any browser to go visit those.
Right, Safari,
websites.
Firefox, Chrome.
Exactly.
Mosaic.
So those are. Well, that's an old browser. But these web pages are open and to all browsers.
Yes.
Just think about it. It's like the virtual assistants are like the new browsers. This is how you use language to access all the different services and digital devices.
Right.
And I would call this the linguistic web. But now the linguistic web it's open, you can enter information in it, but it's proprietary. If they want to make it, they can even choose to say, you cannot put certain services on my virtual assistant because I own it. We do not want we do not want to have a proprietary linguistic web.
This is the future of everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Monica Lam about virtual assistants and really the ecosystem. And that's a great analogy because you're right. I can go onto the web and browse it with a number of browsers. And so you're implicitly saying, why don't we have virtual assistants that I can choose my assistant, and then it accesses the services on the web independent of the source. And so this is not the case now. And I know that you are working on creating this open environment. Yep. So tell me the elements of openness that you think are the kind of critical pieces that need to be put in place.
So our project kind of has two parts. The first is to focus on what we should do about keeping the web open. Keeping, what we would like is that once I have a choice of virtual assistants, I want the virtual assistants to be able to talk to each other, just like email do.
Yes.
And the third thing here is that if everybody is worried about big data because you need the big data to advance science and so forth. But right now, there seems to be not much control that the people have over their data.
To say the least, yes.
So what we
people are very worried about that.
Oh, yeah. What we really want to do is to create we call it an infrastructure, basically a system that allows users to say, you can do this with my data, that with my data, all say in natural language. And now we can have both the AI and privacy at the same time.
So this is exciting because now you're saying you had this analogy to the web browsing, but actually, as we all know, web browsing didn't solve the problem of privacy very well. And we're getting news articles all the time about data that we thought was either confidential or held only for certain very narrow purposes is being used and monetized by companies in ways that we didn't anticipate. You're proposing that this next generation, I think you called it linguistic web, is going to actually try to be built from the start with a better understanding of privacy preferences and options for the user. So that's exciting because it means that we're not just going to move from the graph web to the linguistic web, but it's going to be a better, hopefully a better, more controlled experience.
Yeah.
Will the companies go for this?
That's a very good question. If you look at the industry, I think the interesting news is that if you look at the past, okay, we have the Windows monopoly, and then there's a lot of work on the open Linux operating system.
Yeah.
And of course, because of this open source software, Apple is able to put out macOS, iOS, and Google is doing Android, right?
And those are built on the more open...
They are built on open source software that a lot of people have contributed. So there has been success of these open source systems. And what I see here is that the virtual assistant is kind of like a gateway between consumers and businesses.
Yeah.
All the businesses are interested in this. So if, the fact that there are, if you just have a couple of these platform companies, then a lot of other people are going to say, what about, what can we do? So I think that there is a chance that a lot of companies would want to support this open alternative, okay? Because, a lot of people lose when there is this control over the access of the linguistic web.
Is there a chance? So yes, I totally understand how the upstarts, the ones who don't have a big stake in the game, would say, let's have it be open. That allows me to compete. How about the existing reigning winners, the people who are running Alexa, the people who are running Siri? Are they going to resist this tooth and nail? Or do you think you can make arguments to them about why it would even benefit them to have this more open approach to building these virtual assistants? Or is that just pie in the sky, Russ being not very realistic?
Well, there are two parts to this answer.
Okay, good.
All right. If you think about just the Windows system at Microsoft, and you have a big giant called Apple who says that I have to have my own operating system and I adopt the open source. So it doesn't have to be upstarts that would find this useful. Okay. Because right now, as I mentioned, a lot of the IoTs are hooking up with just Alexa and Google. What about Microsoft? What about Apple? Right? So they would benefit, and those are huge companies that can obviously make a difference. And Apple, Microsoft, and a lot of other companies are interested in privacy. Yes. So this is a way for them to say this. Put their. If this is what you're interested, create the, work on the open web, because that is something that they care about.
This is the future of everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Monica Lam. And now we're talking specifically about this issue of who would adopt these open frameworks. And you just made the argument that actually even the big players might see incentives.
Some of the big players.
Is there... So when you say some, is it for random reasons or are there systematic reasons?
Oh, okay. So I was talking about the fact that if you are not the leaders, in operating system, Apple wasn't the leader and they adopt the open source. So that's one part. The second part here is that turning everything into a linguistic web is a lot of effort. There is a matter of... in the past, it was just putting information up on the website. It's a lot of effort that is amortized across a lot of people.
Yes.
And if you have an open system, more people will be willing to put that information up. They don't really want to say, I am just helping a proprietary platform to succeed.
Right, because when I do my website, I know that everybody will be able to read it. And I want to build a virtual assistant skill. I would probably like to build it once well and have it work everywhere.
That's a very good point. We actually did a prototype where if you enter information into our open source repository, we can stand up a skill for you with Alexa and with Google and with anybody else who wants to come along. I think that that's something that a lot of companies would be interested if they are, they may just be
super useful. I mean, for development, you just got to get it right once, and then your team will take the hard job of kind of compiling it down into the necessary platforms for delivery.
And it is open for other assistants because they really want to reach as many people as they wish.
So let's step back because I'm intrigued. I have no idea how these assistants are built, like these skills. So let's say I want to just do something very simple and I want to have a Siri or Alexa interface to like finding out the weather. Like, how do I do it? How do I know what people are going to say? How do I listen to what people are saying and map it to the right query? Is this like all a well-known thing, or is this still active research?
It is very much an active research. Because natural language is really hard. I mean, you probably have experience with existing assistants, and they sometimes,
failing.
A lot of times, they don't know what you're saying. And this is a very, very hard problem because natural language is hard, and what we are trying to say is very, very broad. As a matter of fact, I think what you're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg of what a virtual assistant can do for you. Okay? And then when I explain that, you will see that it is even harder than just the existing skill.
Good. So paint the future for us.
So today, the assistant is just following your immediate command. Imagine that you are working with your secretary, and then you have to tell them or tell your secretary exactly what to do in every single step.
That would be a reason not to work with that person anymore.
That's not a good assistant.
Right.
So imagine I can say to my assistant, is like, every day, order me an Uber at the end of my workday, based on my calendar. Okay? Now, that is you're now telling the assistant what you want to do in terms of the, based on your habit, or you are now connecting different things together, the calendar and the Uber.
And it can be different each day, so you can't just make it 6 o'clock every day.
Yeah, and then so what I see this is that the virtual assistant lets you even use natural language to create programs. All right, yes. I'm actually giving you recipes, formulas about what we want to do, and it can get arbitrarily complicated, and that's our research topic.
This is The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. More with Monica Lam about the future of a virtual assistants next on Sirius XM Insight 121. Welcome back to The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Professor Monica Lam from Computer Science at Stanford, and we've been discussing virtual assistants. And at the end of the last segment, you were describing new skills for virtual assistants where they had to be a lot more intelligent than they are now. You said, get me an Uber at the end of my workday to take me home. And so that means I need to know what a workday is. I need to know when it ends. I need to know that it's Uber, but you may also be fine with Lyft. You may not really mean Uber literally. So there's a lot of interpretation there. And you and your colleagues are trying to build a system that would support that. So what do you see as the big technical challenges that you need to get on top of in order to enable? And when will we see this?
So the problem is natural language understanding. How do you translate natural language into the meaning,
Yes.
And our solution is to say, this is the computer science way, is to say, look, here's a technology. This is what the virtual assistant can do. We create a neural network that translates natural language into code directly. This is not what the Alexa's commercial assistants are doing.
Okay.
And
so say a little bit more about that. So you hear a command from a user and you write computer code?
The neural network will generate the computer code. This is the AI.
Wow.
And it generates the code to be executed by your virtual assistant. And now code is very expressive. You can talk about when something, get something, do something.
It seems like a lot of this is about abstraction levels. Like instead of being very concrete, as humans, we want to say, you know what I mean, my calendar. And you're going to have to train the AI to get that.
Well, you are way ahead. Okay? At the beginning, I will be very happy if I don't have to ask them to interpret a lot, but just to do exactly Uber is Uber and stuff like
Right.
that. And that's already hard enough.
Okay.
If you have experience with existing
Yes.
assistants. But if you look at Alexa, they have 10,000 employees working on Alexa, because there's a lot of need for training data, the natural language. So what we try to do is to develop tools that make it very easy for people to do a reasonable assistant without collecting a lot of natural language sentences, because that's very expensive.
Right. So this is where the winner-take-all phenomenon might be
Precisely.
important, because now, since Alexa is deployed in millions of houses, and as we learned in the news recently, they're listening to us a lot of that time, they're just getting tons of examples of people saying things both that are meant for Alexa and that are not meant for Alexa.
Yeah.
If I'm a new startup, I don't have that data. So is part of your vision creating some open source data for these new efforts, or is it going to be a different approach?
So first of all, we give people tools so that they can afford to get a much smaller amount of manual effort, because they really cannot afford 10,000 engineers.
No.
Okay, to do something for their own domain. They want to have a linguistic interface for their own domain. It's open source, so we want to say, take this tool, build it, and we can now all together build up a virtual assistant that understands what each domain is about and what the natural language needs to be. And I believe that there is a possibility that this open source system can be even better, because every expert wants to contribute to this open source system.
And we've seen this happen in other settings, and presumably that's the source of your optimism. So I work with drugs, and I want to help patients understand their drug side effects.
Okay.
And so what I always think about is, how hard would it be for me to train Siri or Alexa or any virtual assistant to recognize drug names, to recognize side effects of drugs, so that they could say, what are the side effects of this drug? Or, I'm having headaches. Could this be from the drug I'm taking? And so you have a model where I might not need to get tens of thousands of people talking about drugs, but I may more efficiently get an initial system out there that might work.
Precisely. And and in your case, I mean, would you be more comfortable if you are dealing with an open source system rather than like putting all this information into a proprietary
Absolutely,
system?
especially
So that's
as a physician and as an academic, all my work needs to be in the public domain,
Exactly.
and so it would be very comfortable. This is The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Monica Lam about the future of virtual assistants. Let's go to a couple of things that I'm sure people are worried about. What is the right way to handle people's concerns about privacy and about bad guys getting their data?
So I think that the best model of what we can do that still offers people convenience, right? I mean, convenience trumps everything in a sense, and we have to recognize that.
And what you mean by that is people will do what's convenient, and if it's safe but clumsy, they just won't use it.
Yes. It is really the technologist's responsibility to make something convenient to use and still offer security, privacy. Okay. And I would point to email as a perfect example of what we should have, right? Obviously, there are a lot of companies that that can read a lot of people's emails, but you have a choice, right? You can even run your email server at home. I think Hillary
believe
Clinton
there are
did.
some famous politicians who decided to do that.
And now you have choice, and I can even.
But they did that for security. When they do that, it's because then they are controlling the servers. The rooms that the servers are in are locked, and they say, "Okay, I have some confidence that no one's going to get this."
Yeah, imagine take your cable company. All right, they put a set-top box or put the router in your house, and they say, "Why don't I offer you a virtual assistant?" Box, okay?
Yes.
And your security camera, all the videos go to the box, and the and then your family can look at them rather than it goes to some central server. Alternatively, you can also have services that says, pay me $5 a month. I promise you I will never read your email.
So
and
this
I
is
have
the
a
thing about
business
the email.
contract.
So you have the public email where you're getting it for free, but you're giving up some data, like
Yep.
Google Mail, if you're not paying for it. But then when you do pay for it, the rules change about sharing the data.
Yes, that's what we need.
So do you believe that that people would be willing to get a convenient but slightly more expensive solution in exchange for privacy?
It is up to you. Now you have a choice. We didn't have a choice with, for example, Facebook, right? I cannot say, don't look at my data, I pay you $5, right? And the most important thing is that there is choice. And so that's why we are working so hard on an interoperable open source virtual assistant. So different people can offer different virtual assistants. All the skills are publicly available. It is beneficial to everybody in that sense. And then they can compete. Competition is what changes the game. You cannot just... I mean, regulations are important, and then I think people are doing that. But as technologists, we want to use technical solutions also that says open the space, lots of people competing. Some are good for support your help preserve your privacy, and some people want to offer you really good free service, and they read your data. Now you have choice.
Great. So now you're really painting a pretty clear picture to me, is that I like this idea of there'll be a set-top box that's my virtual assistant. It's the only one I have to deal with because it interacts with my phone, it interacts with my speakers, so it's the one that I like. By the way, have you given this a name yet? Your perfect virtual assistant, or no name yet? Are we going to call it Monica?
Our project today is called Almond.
Almond. Very nice.
It is not a female name. My male students insisted on doing that.
Yeah, so this is as you know, there are huge issues about gender with virtual assistants, and people are now getting very sensitive to why should they always be women's voices, and it's a very interesting topic. But anyway, you have these boxes. If I pay, then I might be able to get services where I can be more certain of my privacy of my data, and if I don't pay, there's a clear understanding that in exchange for being free, my data will be used.
And then you can do half and half. You can say that, I can share my health data without my personal information, and I may even get $1 or $10 for it.
Great. So then now you can have a menu of options and say my health data is private.
It's going to be natural language.
It's going to be right. It'll be a natural language like, Siri, don't give away my health data, but go ahead and tell them what I'm watching on YouTube or whatever.
Precisely.
Okay, well, thank you for listening to The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. If you missed any of this episode, listen anytime on demand with the Sirius XM app.